shot on B. Come on, just use ink, please.
It's been a little over 2 months since Brime was sold. Don't you think it's time to put a little bow on that story and call time of death?
Did someone say Brime?
It's finally time to talk about the next new streaming platform that never was and was never going to be. Of course, I'm talking about Brime. Also known as brimelive, WatchBrime. Brime is just a code name, whatever floats your boat. Back in July 2020, I made a video about Brime being a scam or a fake project and expressing my concern at how large chunk of the streaming community was getting invested in this project, covered in red flags, as they amassed a Twitter following of over 83K basically overnight. Those who enjoy logic and reason seemed to pick up on the red flags I pointed out, while much of the bought-in members of their community enjoyed sharing the video to leave angry comments on it.
So I don't want to say I told you so. Actually, I very much am excited to say I told you so. Today we're talking about Brime's failure to launch.
I announced a follow-up video later in the year, but right as I went to film it, the founder had what appeared to be a mental or medical emergency with some strange circumstances around it, and the video I filmed felt in poor taste to release. Well, a lot of time has passed, a ton has changed with the project, and I keep getting asked, whatever happened to Brime? So it's time to finally tell the story. Buckle in, things are about to get weird.
What's not weird is the segue to our sponsor.
This video is brought to you by Nerd or Die and their ultimate stream packages. You can get everything you need to build an exciting and engaging live stream, from overlays, webcam frames, alerts, backgrounds, full scenes, and even game-specific ones like their new cyberpunk-themed layouts, available for really reasonable prices. And if the prices are still too much for you, how about 50% off? A limited number of you can save 50% off using the coupon code VOX50 at checkout, and the rest of you can save 15% off with coupon code EposVox. Head on over to eposvox.gg/nerdordie and save 50%. Upgrade your stream today. I'm EposVox, the stream professor, and today's video is all about the rise, if you can call it that, it certainly didn't rise very far, and fall of brimelive, a would-be Twitch competitor that managed to amass an incredible following while never actually building anything.
That sounds like someone else I know and their new studio.
Let's start at the beginning. What the heck is Brime, anyway?
Any Brimers?
Any Brimers?
Any Brimers in the chat, guys?
They're Amazon Brime subs.
Yeah.
Brime was an idea, a streaming platform to succeed Mixer that would be the answer to everyone's complaints about Twitch. This is, honestly, the ultimate irony of the entire idea behind the platform, but we'll get there in time. It's important to listen to what I just said, however. Brime was an idea, and nothing more. A gentleman by the name TJ Marsh, also known as Major Respect among other names, was a huge fan of the now defunct streaming platform from Microsoft, and was very disappointed to hear the news of it shutting down in the summer of 2020.
Wait a second. Mixer's shut down? Who have I been streaming to this whole time?
With some amount of IT background, Marsh began to look into what it would take to build a streaming platform of his own. Only instead of looking into server technology, the video bandwidth optimization, normal stuff like that, Marsh looked to other creators who also wanted to build their own streaming services. Marsh wasn't alone. Following Mixer's demise, we saw quite a few new streaming services, or would-be streaming services, materialize. Theta, Lunar, Tencent's Trovo, Gilmesh, etc. These were all hoping to capitalize on the soon-to-be homeless, in a streaming home sense, Mixer streamers looking for the new place to root their community. They were taken advantage of. Marsh found himself in the chats of another creator developing his own streaming platform live on Mixer during its final weeks. He took notes of the ideas he liked and didn't like and decided to launch his own. At the end of June, Marsh made the WatchBrime Twitter account, clearly named to sound similar to Mixer's Watch Mixer accounts.
Whoa!
WatchBrime's first tweet would be an announcement to the world that the future is here and that they were building something new. Around this time, there were many complaints that DrDisrespect, aka Marsh, aka Mixer Magic at the time, had been impersonating or somehow alluding to himself being a Mixer staff member or support representative, in a way of trying to attract people to the next Mixer. I couldn't entirely verify this other than seeing the complainy tweets about it myself, but I have confirmed via multiple sources Marsh's long-running history of over-exaggerating his relationship with companies like Xbox and his role's significance when moderating chat for other popular creators like Boogie2988. He does not have a good reputation or a very reassuring history. The announcement garnered some attention, as did others around the same time, but it wasn't until a connection was, somehow, made between Brime and the banning of DrDisrespect from Twitch that really blew things up. Seemingly the entire world was focused on Twitch as its biggest streamer was banned, seemingly at random, permanently, and without stating a cause. To this day, we still don't have a public official answer from Twitch nor Doc about the ban, with many believing it's because they're tied up in arbitration still. Somehow, a rumor or conspiracy spread that Doc was involved in the project or potentially breached his Twitch contract by helping build Brime or by signing on to their partner program, a site that had 0 lines of code at this point, by the way, and the Twitter account blew up. They were all too happy to talk around the issue and wink at it, using the suggestion of their connection to build clout. Eventually, DrDisrespect did technically confirm that there was no connection, but he always used vague, nonsensical wording to say so without actually saying so. This was deliberate. Rumors spread, the conspiracy built, and then a handful of articles from major publications came out debunking the whole thing, which just served as further advertising for the account. By this point, WatchBrime had nearly 90,000 followers on Twitter, including major names such as Jeff Keighley and Ninja, and then started to launch their own Discord server.
Hey, speaking of followers, do you know who follows me?
Who?
You, idiot!
While this could seem like Brime's 15 minutes of fame and the point where many might launch their online careers from, this is where things really went wrong for them. They weren't ready for the spotlight. Few are, but few also fumble it quite as bad and quite so quickly as Brime had.
It's strange because, like, even as I said before, people are asking for a new platform. Then they hate on the idea of another platform starting.
During the week in which all of the DrDisrespect drama was occurring, Marsh announced and posted a Q&A thread to the WatchBrime account. This did not go well. I don't have much by the way of screenshots from the original thread, but essentially at least one attempt was made at the Q&A thread before the one that remained up was posted. Each time the answers or writing were not well received, the WatchBrime account took down the posts, claiming to have been hacked or someone else unassociated with the project was doing it, and later doxed, and then posted a new thread hoping for a better audience reception the next time. Spelling, punctuation, grammar, and overall writing are not Marsh's strong suit, but more importantly, the thread focused entirely on superficial things that a fledgling streaming site shouldn't be worrying about for years to come. They focused on their would-be partner program and who would be allowed to stream, how they would treat partners, whether they would ban alienity, things like that. Not, how they're actually building the complex data-heavy backend to run a streaming site in the first place. This was the first red flag, other than the deleted threads and childish behavior up to that point. At this point, they've promised to be bringing a great new streaming site to the world and described how their partner and verification programs might work, but have provided zero evidence that they've even started the what should be multi-year journey of actually building the tech required here. Seriously, it's 3 a.m. Be right back, folks. Duty calls.
Well, I guess since Adam is just too busy, I'll do his job for him. Over the next few months, Brime would bring on one developer. They would make a Discord server and install a mod team that hid their identities behind Lord of the Rings references. Bunch of nerds. Lots of drama went down there, including accusations of Marsh and the team doxing people on the server. Pointless drama over who got banned from the server, stealing artwork without credit, and of course, sending lots of people towards Adam to make comments on his videos.
Through this, the quote-unquote team continued making bigger and bigger promises for what the site could deliver, presented not even a single shred of evidence they developed anything, and continued to partake in the most middle school level drama scenarios possible. At no point did Marsh or any of his supposed team members ever bother to actually register the name Brime as a real business entity either. No copyright, no trademarks, didn't even register domain names. So since like attracts like, the drama-focused brand found themselves in a predicament where mass amounts of fake Brime accounts showed up to troll or misdirect people, Brime domains were bought up and directed to Rickrolls or other streaming services. Discerning what was even real or fake became a little troublesome for a while. Most of their announcements or official statements of progress came with many contradictions or wording about programming and tech things that sounded like they were a bad TV writer's interpretation of how tech worked. Along the way, another fake streaming service showed up, Ribble. This account went hardcore, announcing that the name Brime had been hijacked from them, and that they were the real people building the alleged stream service, and that everyone needed to stop associating the tomfoolery of the new Brime's accounts with them. Which of course no one was doing since no one had heard of this. But it worked. They gained a bit of a following, leading people to believe that they were the original creators and such. A video intro was made and a whole alleged company structure was built, but they seem to have given up the act once Brime lost relevance and have since deleted their Twitter and YouTube.
So that basically at this point I can't handle all of this, because it was supposed to be a small passion project with some friends that we were hoping would be the next thing that people would like, and it turned into a monstrosity of no other.
Months have passed, originally announced timelines have long since been missed, and not a scrap of tangible development evidence was ever presented. They decided they needed to actually show something, so they launched alpha signups. Ooh boy, was this another dumpster fire. Their quote-unquote alpha site was nothing but a super quick free WordPress website template with an email sign-up form. The whole website reeked of incompetence at web development, but worse yet, they technically committed a crime. The website was gathering emails while breaking GDPR. They managed to add text that said, "By giving us your email, you agree to our terms of service and privacy policy," or whatever, but they never actually linked what those policies were. When called out on this, the Brime Twitter gave a nonsense pretend technical jargon answer blaming a git push and translation issues for why it wasn't made properly. Yeah, you heard me right. Translations from their native language of middle school English to adult English? Eventually, they just used an auto-generator for a privacy policy PDF and linked that, but that was after many emails had been collected and people were easily able to identify the site they used to generate that privacy policy. And it was also full of typos, like the website. Eventually, the email form stopped working, as it appeared they were kicked from their first mailing list provider after being reported for using fake addresses and personal info. They claimed this was a stress test, as if a WordPress email form is at all a stress test for a massive video streaming platform, and then swapped mailing list services, still providing fake names and addresses, breaking their terms of service as well. So many red flags here. All of the red flags. Just all of them. A few users reached out to me following the alpha launch, as a day or two after submitting their email to the forum, they started receiving massive email spam that they had never received before.
Well, if they wanted to commit some crimes, they should have asked. I certainly know a thing or two, and I could have gave them some tips.
The next major announcement was an announcement of an announcement of an announcement. Feeling the pressure of their massive following demanding to know what's up, and a growing number of people seeing reason and realizing all the red flags and lack of substance meant it wasn't legit, the Brime account announced that they would reveal their development roadmap on a specific day, showing the progress they've made on building the platform, what they were still working on, what they needed help with, etc. Instead of actually showing it on that day, DrDisrespect, aka Marsh, streamed a video of a heartbeat animation to their Discord server for nearly 24 hours, presumably while scrambling to figure out what a roadmap even was and how to build it. Sometime during the early AM the next day, a product launch plan was released. This supposedly detailed a few different categories of actions required to build the site, which had already been done, including in the months that have passed, despite those things clearly not being done, and so on. Supposedly they hired PR staff, which if you read anything they said publicly, you know wasn't true. They fluffed it out with individual items for creating each individual social media account, constant listings of searching for funding. It was a mess and none of it was accurate. Supposedly they had the front page and channel pages designed and finished by August, but could never bother teasing them with even a single screenshot to quell the concerns of how not legitimate this whole thing was. Seeing this comforted some people with a January 2021 launch planned, but in reality, this was just more red flags. The product plan page is still up, I'll link it in the description. Around all of this announcement, in the most convincing way of showing they were neck deep in development work, Brime continued to be involved in drama, participating in petty fights on Twitter and making a lot of unflattering noise. In fact, for much of the summer and early fall, DrDisrespect himself was spending basically all day every day in a video call and streaming with Discord Go Live in the Brime Discord server, responding to drama, negativity, and pseudo-doxing people they didn't get along with. Like, every day. I'm not sure how you believe someone is working hard on a massive project while still hanging out with them during all hours of the day, but some people were really bought in on this idea. In fact, actually, in retrospect, I believe half of the people on those calls were just recording those calls every day looking for something incriminating. They weren't actually interested in Brime by that point. The drama came to a head when Marsh claimed he was in legal trouble. Supposedly a gentleman by the name Matthew Lee was suing Marsh and trying to take Brime away from him. Marsh played up the drama of this for a couple weeks and talked about how he'd never give up Brime and how he'd fight for the community while some bad guy tried to take it from him.
What had actually happened is that Lee, EGN founder on Twitter, developer of NX Labs, his own streaming site project which he'd been working on for years, sent Marsh a cease and desist letter. Well, kinda. It was actually a Word document via email. Not even a PDF. I guess close enough for him.
Apparently most of the unique features that Marsh had detailed for Brime's streaming site, which admittedly were not significant in my opinion, such as having merch sales on the stream pages, were taken straight from Lee's work. Remember how I mentioned that Marsh enjoyed watching someone else develop a streaming site before deciding to launch Brime? He was a regular in Lee's Mixer chat, as Lee worked on his streaming site. It appears Marsh just took a lot of the ideas with him. Again, they're not unique or all that protectable as far as I can tell, but whatever. The C&D was sent in a Word document after all. The C&D letter really just demanded that Marsh stop using ideas stolen from Lee in his work on Brime. That's it. But as was his nature when handling public PR, Marsh had to turn it into a whole ordeal. First, Lee was trying to steal Brime and his community from him. Then he was taking Lee to court over this. It's worth noting here that Marsh stated many times that he was going to sue me for defamation over my original video about Brime, or that I would end up in legal trouble. So he'd kind of already established himself as all bark and no bite. But then things got really weird, like really weird. Marsh planted multiple different narratives all at once on the server to the extent that no one had any idea what to believe. Not his mods, not his supposed team members, and certainly not the public users of the server. One thread was that he was selling Brime for 6 figures to get them out of legal trouble. He laughed at the very idea in a call I had with him during this time when asked about it. The next thread was that Lee had already gotten the courts, or whomever Marsh seems to think would enforce things here, to force him to turn over the Brime Twitter and Discord server. This is where it became clear that Marsh was simply not suited to handle public pressure and the scrutiny that he brought upon himself. He deactivated the WatchBrime Twitter account over and over, claiming he had to because of the quote-unquote lawsuit, or that he just had no idea what was happening with it. Again, there was no lawsuit. He also started destroying the Discord server from the inside out, deleting channels, removing everyone's roles, all this while sitting in voice chat on the server, feigning being upset that all his hard work had been taken from him and that this was his last goodbye.
You know in grade school when you might text someone that you had a crush on, and you ask if they liked you, and then you pretend that it was your brother or friend texting instead of you? This is kind of like that. Gaslighting. But, you know, with a strategy designed by a 5th grader.
Along the way, Marsh crafted a story that stuck a little more reliably, that he was framed. Again, there's no lawsuit here. But nevertheless, he was framed. That this whole lawsuit, taking away everything he worked so hard on all year, was actually the doings of a spy.
Gentlemen.
That he had actually brought on an engineer to his team and that engineer is the one who came up with all of these ideas for the site and did the actual development. Notice how this is actually just admission that Marsh had done literally nothing to build Brime, but I digress. This engineer was actually an employee of Matthew Lee's and had planted all of these ideas for Brime so that once they actually built something, Lee could claim it was his and take it all away. That spy engineer defected, left Brime, and took all the code and work with him, leaving Marsh to be sued into oblivion.
And the only thing that was public and was visible was the alpha signups, which was done by the same person that I still allegedly believe worked for this Matthew guy the entire time to sabotage Brime. Now, I have no proof of said, allegations, but the way it's looking is exactly how it looks.
So he actually took the time to make stuff for you, only to set you, to then turn around and say you were stealing it?
Yeah. That's what it looks like. And, I mean, there's even a message from this ex-person that said, I don't want to show you, but it literally says, because Discord terms of service and things like that, I don't want to violate anybody's privacy. I've never had any intention to do such. Basically, he was saying, I only said yes because everything listed was very vague and in a way does represent what Brime was. Well, he wasn't a paid employee. He was a volunteer because we were still trying to get funding.
Right.
We weren't funded yet. And this person is well aware and even was in the Brime Discord talking to people and admitted, because he said this, right? So technically I'm not breaking anything because he said it in our Brime Discord at the time that that Matthew is trying to take Brime, and that he admitted that he felt bad because everything was so vague about the features that were listed.
Marsh supposedly moved, forced to by the alleged swatting he endured after he was doxxed by someone at some point, which I'm pretty sure no one believed, and it almost seemed like he had given up. He was ready to move on from this whole Brime ordeal. The dust settled, nothing ever came of the cease and desist, nor the lawsuit that never existed. The Discord server was real confused as to who was running this crapshoot, and the Twitter kept getting deleted and undeleted. He had claimed to have hired a new PR team and let all of the Lord of the Rings Council of Mods leave, pretended that someone else was running the server for a while, though the new owner and him never chatted in the server at the same time, but then he undid all of that after a while as well. Brime tweeted that they had an idea, quote-unquote idea, to sell merch to fund the site. Another red flag. Not only had I already preached about how a quote-unquote company or site with this many red flags and lack of evidence of actually existing, asking for money from the public was a bad idea, but merch is not a profitable endeavor where most only get to keep about $2 per t-shirt sold. It's just a terrible business decision in the first place. Also, why put all this effort into branding and sell merch if Brime is just a code name?
Hey, speaking of merch, when are you going to tell them about all of the awesome new...
Silence.
I can't let you do that, Vox!
During many of my back and forths with Marsh and the Brime Twitter, they kept arguing that Brime wasn't a company, was a company, or was just a startup, which is still a company, by the way.
Yeah, he's trying to be
into a better website.
Twitch bootlicker. That's what it looks like.
In reality, it was just Marsh. No business filings, no registered names, nothing. The whole time I'd been tearing my hair out asking the obvious questions and still being made out to be the bad guy. How could you claim to want a Twitch alternative based on the poor management that Twitch had, and then support a quote-unquote company with even worse management than Twitch? How could you expect that to work out well?
But I'm obligated to sign a 10-year NDA. And I swear on everything that if I knew that this was gonna happen, to where someone would swoop through and say you're stealing my IP, and like I've never literally met this guy or talked to him or anything, I would have avoided this whole thing.
It was by this point that the real problem was blindingly obvious to me. Marsh did not want any of this. He wasn't ready for the absurd amount of tension the accounts had garnered, the pressure of building something that was in reality no more than a pipe dream to him, the sketches of comic books or computers you wanted to build while sitting in your high school classes. And he was clearly an unstable individual in some capacity, or just really had a super immature way of handling any of these stressors or confrontations. I reached out. I wanted to have a real conversation with this man to get the real story out of him and talk him out of making things worse for himself. I got him on a call and we chatted over Discord voice for about 45 minutes. I was mainly focused on listening, but I honestly didn't get much out of him. I tried challenging things I knew were false, but he was still set on this narrative that he was sued and couldn't retain control over the accounts. Meanwhile, Matthew Lee was confused by any of these claims and had done nothing more than send him a C&D email. Instead, Marsh's focus was all on the drama. Claims of him doxing team members, who was banned from the server, claims that he was sleeping with one of the mods, stuff children started making 4-hour video call recordings about, claiming to expose Marsh for committing major crimes while presenting nothing of value. I did not care to participate in this nonsense. In fact, many former quote-unquote insiders of Brime reached out over and over and over with these claims, all releasing massive multi-hour video call recordings, all a waste of my time. I was frankly just saddened that I put in all of this effort to focus on the actual streaming platform side of things and how this is problematic for the scene, and people think I just care about childish drama and what happens inside a Discord server. Regardless, I made Marsh an offer. I offered him a vague, flexible amount of money up front for him to reactivate the Twitter and sell it to me and get rid of it for good. I would nuke all of its history, rebrand it, and never mention Brime again, and you put the following to use for streamer education, letting Marsh put all of his stress and disaster behind him. Win-win. He gave a hint of interest to me, but said he would let me know, but apparently he was ecstatic at the idea behind the scenes, as he quickly told other people how excited he was.
But, like, I honestly, like, even though I was a little taken back by your video, to be honest with you, I could see, I recently rewatched it. And I was like, yeah, you made some valid points.
Instead, Marsh went a different direction. Supposedly, they were well-funded all of a sudden and had purchased 12 open-source projects that they would close up and integrate into Brime and its API, and they were launching an alpha on October 1st. That was quite the pivot. It turns out that Marsh's daily F5ing of a Google search for free streaming site finally turned up a result. A developer by the name of Demise had released his first functioning beta of a project he'd been working on quietly since 2018. OSP, or Open Streaming Platform. It was a basic but functional framework for quickly launching your own streaming site. Brime announced that they would be using this technology, implying that Demise was working for or with them, which he definitely did not appreciate, and then brought on 2 developers who were experienced with Linux, and they began deploying their own OSP instance. Brime launched an alpha doing exactly what I predicted. Slapping their logo, or sometimes not even bothering, on someone else's work, and claiming to have been developing it since June. Despite the fact that, none of this was their own work and they literally didn't find the project until September. Regardless, having some degree of an alpha gave some legitimacy to the project for some users, though the site quickly crumbled under the load, as Demise had already identified OSP struggled with one important thing: scalability. Yikes. Brime was all too happy to play it up, however, claiming these were all stress tests and misrepresenting data, claiming over 300,000 users tried accessing the site, which just wasn't true. Eventually, people got mad once things stopped working for good, and Brime concluded their alpha stress test.
So, I'm just putting this out there, but what if I was Major Respect this whole time, but Brime was actually something that I was going to make? Like, I mean, I'm not saying it was, but yeah, what if it was?
No, what are you talking about? Can I finish my video, please? Jesus. Come on.
Right. Can we still work together if I was secretly your enemy this entire time?
No?
Things went quiet for a while, and the two developers who spun up the OSP instance left due to the community breaching their privacy and threatening to dox them and their family. Like attracts like. Things mostly stayed quiet from there, with only drama or fake tech babble coming from the Brime Twitter account and the Discord server getting more and more impatient. Behind the scenes, however, Marsh was apparently having an even worse time with the pressure. From what I had been told by multiple sources, he kept streaming to Twitch, claiming he was being doxxed and swatted constantly, and weird ravings like that. He apparently just walked out of his room angry and upset in the middle of a live stream one day, and just left the stream up for hours when it was suddenly cut off.
Mapadel, Blue Spice Gaming, Terminex, owned by Mapadel, Blacklisted, owned by Mapadel, and many other accounts.
Those around him reached out to me, because I had DM access to him, as they had feared the worst. The next day, Marsh released the following statement. Hey friends, after careful guidance from medical professionals and my local police department, I have been given the advice and instructed that for my own mental health to walk away from the internet for the time being. There is an active investigation as well regarding what I have been encountering, and I am complying with the law and will allow them access to my personal belongings, electronics, laptop, computer, and mobile, as they work with other branches to solve the issues I have encountered. Be kind, as you don't know who you may be damaging. I do not share this quote to make light of this. While I'm fully willing to believe that this was completely made up based on his history of everything, and the wording of this sounds like absolute nonsense, the possible implications of what may have happened here are too severe to poke fun at. Either way, this was kind of the end for Brime. A couple weeks later, on October 12th, 2020, Brime announced that it was actually acquired. A company by the name of Tupero has acquired Brime and would be developing it moving forward, with a more real-looking roadmap released, although it was still just an image. I can't find much about Tupero. They potentially developed Novu, a game engine and social platform, but their website was basically built for this announcement, and that's the only post still on their site. That being said, as the transition happened, the team, which appears to just be two college kids as the only members of Tupero, had a Discord call with the community to describe what was happening and talk about plans. This time it was real. But don't get confused. Tupero did not buy a streaming platform. I confirmed with one of the founders later that they literally did not acquire a single scrap of code or development assets. All they bought was the quote-unquote IP, which had no formal registration to it anyway. They essentially bought the Twitter account, as I had tried to, and the Discord server. They later got themselves locked out of the Twitter account for quite some time as well. If I had to guess, I would imagine Tupero paid between $2,000 and $5,000. It could have been a lot less, as Marsh needed to ditch the project and it wasn't worth anything, but if the Tupero boys weren't smart, they could have paid a lot more. But really, social numbers or not, imagine paying a ton of money for a name and keeping that name for a brand with such a terrible reputation so far. It boggles the mind.
You think that boggles the mind? Just wait till you see how much I'm selling your channel for!
Wait, what?
Around this announcement, Marsh was still claiming he was being doxxed and taking legal action against those he disliked, that he accomplished more than any average person in life. Keep in mind again, nothing was actually developed for Brime, and that he had started and been building an esports team now. All, of course, being absolute bullcrap. Marsh seems to have mostly enjoyed his break from Brime, transitioning to just being a normal Fortnite streamer, but still regularly dives into the drama about Brime or making exaggerated claims about things he has done. Never change, I guess. It would appear Tupero has made some degree of progress and is still working on actually developing Brime into something real, but it remains to be seen whether they can make up for the terrible PR cloud that will hang over the brand's head. In December of 2020, Marsh sent out a tweet longer with "The Truth About Brime," which is just a doubling down on this story about how he was swatted and doxxed and Lee sent a spy into his ranks to sabotage the entire effort, while thinking and blaming the spy simultaneously for this. It's a mess. It's contradictory to every story Brime was telling publicly at the time. It's a tall tale in the first place, and I can't believe 2 months after selling it and ridding himself of the problem, Marsh still wants to keep himself wrapped up in this bizarre drama narrative. Honestly, we just kind of end this with me feeling sad. You have a person who was not fit to run a major, high-follower count brand, who managed to fall into the public eye with conspiracies about Shroud, Doc, and Ninja being involved, encouraged these conspiracies through and through, and quite literally crumbled under pressure. I still believe that Brime was an idea that Marsh had, one of those written in the margins of a book kind of ideas that went too far. And while I feel that Marsh is a victim in this to some capacity, you don't publicly announce yourself as delivering a need to an audience desperately looking for a solution if you haven't actually figured out what that is. Time and time again, the Brime account doubled down on lies, nonsense, drama, and making problems worse and making more problems for themselves. And I can only sympathize a small amount with that. That's the story. That's what happened to Brime. I would like to say that it's all behind us and we can forget about it, but unless Tupero is going to rebrand at some point, we may still continue hearing about the name for some time to come.
Just wait until I tell the story about the rise and fall of EposVox in a few months. That one will be glorious!
Excuse me? What?
Huh? Oh, nothing. I think I hear Harris on the other line. Bye!
So that's it. I've been asked countless times to tell this story, and I only have so much by way of screenshots of some of the earlier stuff that went down and archived of the whole ordeal. But this is what I could gather from interviews, the stuff I did save, things like that, and from those who spent time in the Discord server. This isn't necessarily a fun tale, it was at first, not necessarily the ending, but one that I think the streaming community would like to know and should keep in mind moving forward, regardless. We're still getting up to speed with the new studio. There's a lot more to do and a lot more time-consuming tasks than I originally anticipated, but it's going to be well worth the wait. Thank you so much for your support this past year, for the support so far. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe for more stream guides. I'm EposVox. Be sure to have a good one.
Well, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.